Last week in the chat, when we were doing our kind of like opening welcome meeting, a lot of you were asking about like, what kind of editing software should I learn if I want to go into XYZ type of field? So if you want to go into animation, what should you know if you want to be an editor in animation or motion graphics or commercials versus doc versus short form music video feature, so all that kind of stuff. So I know there's like some people are like, I need to take Avid, I have to take it so I can be certified and it'll look good on my resume, and that's the only way I'm going to get an editing job or a producing job in certain fields. So I thought I would bring a bunch of people who are working in those fields and have a lot of information to share with you guys. So I don't know who wants to start, but we've got, does anyone have to go back to work and now is a good time? Okay. So we've got visual effects editors. We've got people who receive projects from editorial rooms. We have people who've worked in commercials, and we have Lauren. I don't know exactly what your work is considered. It's all short form, right?
Yeah, it's short form branded content.
Yeah. We have conform editors. We have Nick, you do health stuff.
I do everything now.
Everything.
Except for fiction.
Cool. And then Mike, is he still here? Yeah. So he does sports, motion graphic stuff. And Jack, you did some trailer editing and things like that. So it's like all over the place. And then we have Sam who does color. So he also gets like a lot of files from clients in all different formats and has to figure out how to work with them. Ed, I don't know what you do at Blizzard, but that would be interesting to know too. So we have gaming as well. So does anyone want to get us started? Does anyone have any questions first that you want to, like, burning questions that you want to know? Or should we just kind of go around and people can say like what they work on and things like that? Cool. Okay. So I guess we could start with the people from Harbor, since there's 3 of you here. So Ben, Nico, and Sam.
I can start.
Okay.
To kick off the Harbor gang. So we don't do a ton, at least in DI, we don't really do actual editing.
You might have to explain what DI is.
So DI is digital intermediate, which is basically the color grading phase of the filmmaking process or TV making process, commercial process. It's just where all the color happens. And usually, at least in long form, which is like 95% of what I do, the projects that we receive are edited in Avid. And the turnover that we receive is usually consisting of EDLs and bins, and it all comes from Avid. There is a rare occasion where we'll get a feature that's been done in Premiere. I think I've seen 1 Final Cut project in my day, and yeah, but 95% Avid stuff. We don't do any actual editing ourselves just for this process. It's all conform work, which is basically reassembling the edit in a different piece of software. So normally the conform will happen in the software that the colorist is using. So for the longest time it's been Resolve, but now we're switching to Baselight. So all of our conform is now happening in Baselight. But a lot of times for usually mixed doc projects, that conform will actually happen in Flame, and then it will be sent over to the color software. So, you know, the publish is exported from Flame and then brought into Resolve for the colorist to work on, and then it comes out of there. But yeah, most of the projects are Avid.
So Avid on client side for feature fiction. What about nonfiction?
Nonfiction, still usually Avid. I'd say maybe slightly more Premiere for nonfiction, but you know, it's rare when we get something that's from Premiere and you have to like dive into the Premiere project and see what was going on. Yeah, definitely mostly Avid stuff.
And episodic?
Also Avid. Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a Premiere episodic project.
Okay. So Sam mentioned Resolve. So everyone has Resolve for free. So you can learn that. Baselight, assume not free, very not free.
There is a student version which is free. Yes, which has been around a while, I guess, but it's Baselight is like so inaccessible to most people that it's like, why would you even learn Baselight? But it is there if you are curious to poke around in it. It's very similar to Resolve, but also very different in that you can do a lot of the same things color-wise, but the way that Baselight is kind of focused is a very different direction than the way that Blackmagic has been pushing Resolve. So there are no editorial features, there's no audio, visual effects, all the things that Resolve has been improving on in the past like 5 years. None of that exists in Baselight. Baselight is just for DI color stuff.
Is that why you guys are switching to it, or is there a different reason for that?
Yes, and there's also a variety of reasons. It's good because we get to learn a new piece of software, but it's also very frustrating because we have to learn how to use Baselight, which it operates totally different from Resolve. So it's frustrating, but it is a much more focused piece of software. So it's made purely for doing feature film, episodic, commercial, DI stuff, which is a good thing. So yeah, if you wanted to learn how to kind of come into this world and do conform things, or even if you weren't doing conform things, it's still useful to know. Baselight is good to practice in. There's the student one, which is free. I'm not sure of the limitations of the student version versus the full version, but it's there to practice on. So yeah.
Cool. Do you want to put some of that in the chat?
I'd love to.
Thank you. And then Ben, you're more on the conform side, and then Nico, you're more on the VFX Flame side,
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
Correct.
So do you both use Flame, or okay.
I use Flame.
So
Ben.
maybe, Ben, do you want to start since you're closer to what Sandwich was talking about?
Yeah, so I'm going to put a pretty big just asterisk on this. I've only been doing this for like 6 months, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Sam can confirm or correct me on anything. So yeah, conform, like Sam said, up until recently, it was all Resolve. So a lot of the times when we have to do conform work like that, if there's VFX shots or something like that, when you're doing conform, if it's something you can't like easily do in Resolve, like if it's a stabilize that needs a little bit more work, or if there's like a license plate to blur out, we'll take all those shots that need to be sent to Flame. We'll export an EDL, we'll send those out to Flame. So it'd be to someone like Nico or Chris McKenzie, and they would do that shot and then send us back to Flame Publish to cut back in as a VFX shot. We are switching over to the Baselight, like Sam said. It's a very steep learning curve. It's a lot. The way I like to describe it is, if you know Premiere and you're learning Avid, it kind of feels the same way going from Resolve to Baselight. And it's kind of there's tools there that are really useful, but a lot of it just isn't intuitive. So it's really frustrating sometimes. But we're getting there. So Baselight, like Sam said, there's no editing, there's no audio. With Conform and Baselight, though, it's nice because in Resolve, you import your EDL or your AAF that we'll get from Avid from a client. And if something doesn't link up, you kind of have to dig around in the bin in Avid or try exporting the new AAF. In Baselight, though, it tries a bunch of different ways to do the conform for you, and you can kind of play around with it and try and get it to conform as nicely as possible. I don't have a ton of baseline experience yet. I'm trying to work on that right now as we speak. So with on the editing side though, yep, like Sam said, I have only seen Avid stuff come through. I had to do one thing for, I think I had one project that was a doc that was in Premiere. I'm not even sure if it was, I'm not completely sure if it was in Premiere, but I know I did some work on it with Premiere. But other than that, it's all been Avid.
Cool. And then Nico, I remember when you were in school, you tried Flame. So there must have been some kind of version that you could
Must have been
download.
a version of what?
Flame?
Yeah, well, that's what I use now. What do you mean?
No, when you were in school.
Oh yeah, there was definitely flame around. But also smoke was kind of like still usable slash in the conversation, but now it's all flame.
Yeah. So you have like an experience at 2 different places. So you have like in a design studio, plus you have a big commercial studio. So maybe you can talk about company 3 method a little bit and then how it's different maybe where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So for one, I started off basically at company 3 method in the VFX side of things, kind of handling commercial needs, but there was a small kind of design team that was fostered within that I was like the assistant to. So I got a bit of a boutique experience within like a corporate kind of entity. And it was really cool. It was really heavy volume of work, and the needs are very different than in a I would say like a film or TV kind of world, just because it's a higher rate of turnover. It's a different process, but it was mainly editors on Avid sending work over to the flame artists, and then we had some Resolve in house as well as a couple like new compositors and like actual design artists in various kind of 3D and 2D programs. But yeah, that was method, and then I came over to Harbor into a much more VFX centered kind of around narrative fiction as well as nonfiction documentary work. And it's a lot more of a piecemeal kind of basis where whatever, like Ben and Sam kind of said, whatever needs to be done in a more VFX heavy way, it kind of is pulled out and extracted and then sent over to someone who's going to specifically do the work, return it, and then it's going to be recut into the conform. So a big point of emphasis, I would say, like in the difference is how you kind of translate the material between each other. I would say there's much more of a emphasis and importance on how you can send material to each other, work on it, and then return it in different formats and different various ways to convey different parts of the edit. So that was a huge learning curve. I felt like I saw between a commercial and a design house and this new kind of, I don't know exactly how you describe Harbor, but the finishing facility. But yeah, that's kind of the overview of the softwares at least.
So what would you recommend someone's try now if they were going to go into Flame?
I think honestly, the earliest thing you can start on is something like After Effects. But if you actually want that flame sort of conform workflow opportunity, you're not going to get that out of After Effects. And I would honestly say Resolve can offer you the most similar kind of workspace and introduction to node-based compositing and how to kind of build an entire conform in a project that you would finish from start, middle to end, versus somewhere in like After Effects. I feel like you get a different approach, and you're kind of thinking a little bit more narrowly, not necessarily on the entirety of the project, but just on like one comp at a time. I know there's probably a few of you that have used After Effects and kind of built like a timeline and with pre-comps and stuff, and it can be done, but it's definitely not meant to be done in the same way that you would use like a project, a software like Flame or even Resolve, which kind of has like better linking between compositions and nested sequences and whatnot. But yeah, I think they give a really great introduction to the world of going from the beginning to the end in a different kind of professional way. Oh, and then another thing I was trying to say, my mic wasn't working earlier, was Sam was talking about the kind of why the emphasis or why the need to go to Baselite. For me, someone who kind of came from outside the world and never hearing about it, I would say the biggest thing is that one, the support that Filmlight offers is pretty crucial for a big company that's trying to really refine their entire network of software that they use for many reasons, like Sam said, but the main one being like the support they have is exclusively for the pro level kind of workers, and the tools that are available are much more suited to our workflows, where you have to do a lot of batch operations, you have to manage large volume of things, you have to kind of work parametrically or non-destructively, where you're able to quickly update things rather than having to kind of rebuild something that you would in like a layer-based system like After Effects or anything similar. So that's another reason.
Yeah, and to add on to that, the way that Resolve has kind of been evolving or not evolving in the past few years, a lot of Resolve's DI conform E kinds of tools have basically not been touched in years and years. And there are so many things that, I have like a 12-page document of notes and changes that Resolve needs to make that we've tried to send to them before, and they basically just don't listen to it. And they've put out update after update for all of their new editorial tools and audio tools and all of those things, and they basically kind of just ignore our portion of the market. And Filmlight, like Nico said, has Harbor has a dedicated person that we can go to and be like, the software doesn't do this, we needed to do this, can you give that feedback straight to the software engineers? And it's just a much more it's a much better relationship that we have for that kind of software, which is great. One other thing that I wanted to add was that for commercial stuff, which I don't usually touch, but I think all of our in-house commercial production stuff is all done in Premiere. So yeah, Premiere is definitely used more for commercial things from what I've seen.
Cool. Well, maybe we should go to our commercial people next, if we have any. So Lauren, you said you do some branded content. Before we move on to that, does anyone have any questions about what Conform is? Okay, so Melise, you would like Karan? Okay. Go, Sam.
Okay, so Conform, it's a weird word. It doesn't really make a lot of sense just based on what the word is, but basically the very simple definition is the timeline, the project is cut in one piece of software, and that then needs to be rebuilt in another piece of software because the colorist is going to be working in Resolve or Baselight or whatever other piece of software, and you have to bring the project from one into the other. And it's the job of the Conform artist to basically reassemble that project in the other piece of software to best match how it existed in the editorial software. And so they will receive a batch of files from the editor or assistant editor or whoever that they will use to help rebuild that project. So that is usually a bin or a Premiere project or whatever. So they can actually go into the actual project itself on their end, and they will also receive usually a few EDLs, which is basically a text file, a human readable text file of all of the edits that exist in the project. And so the Conform artist will take all of that information and use that to reassemble the project to match exactly how it existed in the editorial software. And so that is the job of the Conform artist. And there's a lot of curveballs that can be thrown in the direction of the Conform artist, depending on the nature of the project itself. If it's a feature, a commercial, a mixed format doc kind of thing, which can make their job a lot harder or a lot easier. And so usually the Conform is done in the color software, so in Baselight or Resolve. But if it's something that's a lot more complicated, or if the original source is, there's a lot of different kinds of sources, especially if it's, a lot of kinds of archival footage or things like that. A lot of times Flame is usually better for those sorts of Conform jobs. So the Conform will be done in Flame, and then it will be exported out of Flame and brought into the color software for the colors.
Yeah, another way of kind of think of it simply is like you have to take the whole project. So even the simplest form, when you have your own kind of project you're working on, you're gonna have to go through all the different VFX shots, work on the different titles, work on the different scenes, all these layers you have. And when you're working on that in many different softwares, you're trying to bring them all together. You're conforming them into one language that is easily updatable, workable. There's no format issues, and that's like what the entire industry of conforming and finishing is it's expanding that idea that you take apart all the parts that make up the whole, and then kind of seamlessly optimize them all into one world, at the highest resolution that the source was, rather than what the editors were working at. Maybe it was like HD. And that enables a lot of benefits and advantages for the post process. It enables to kind of update on the fly.
Yeah, that's another thing that I failed to mention, is that one of the most basic jobs of the conform artist is to convert from working on proxy media or whatever the editor was cutting with into the actual original camera files that need to be used for visual effects or color or all of those things.
Yeah, it's when all the whips become the final. Everything is meshing into one.
Yeah.
Basically, all the
Transition.
creative editing happens in client editorial on low res media.
Correct.
Then it goes back to another facility to recreate the entire project with the high res media. And that's where they work. So there's two types of editors. One is creative, one is technical. Like one's matching and putting the puzzle together.
Yeah, I was about to say, I'd like to think of it as building a Lego set. Instructions, you have your pieces, you just
Yeah.
have to put them together and match the box.
Yeah, the two other terms used for that is offline and online. Offline being the creative editorial in Avid, online being the one who's doing the conform with the high res material.
Cool. Does that make sense? Awesome. All right. So branded content, commercials. So is that just Lauren and Jack? Okay. Go for it. What do you use? What's your what have you seen out there? So your client side. So you are working with the files that directly go out to what the audience sees, or are you doing proxy workflows like we were just talking about and they go somewhere else?
Am I starting off?
If you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah, so we primarily shoot like branded short form content. So we shoot a lot of the stuff ourselves. We hire out like film people and they shoot it, and then we edit it in-house. Occasionally we'll hire out editors, but we're primarily working in Premiere with online files. Occasionally we'll create proxies just to make stuff easier on our computers, but we're not doing a whole conform stuff. We're just editing in Premiere. So that's kind of what
Usually commercials have a really tight deadline, so you don't really have that flexibility to do offline media and online. Cool.
Oh, we're getting a screen share. Yeah, for the most part, a lot of our deadlines are pretty tight. Usually we'll get something and it usually has to be turned around within a week to a week and a half. Occasionally we have stuff that's longer, because we do some long form content still in Premiere. None of us use Avid. We have one editor that uses Final Cut for some reason, not really sure why. But for the most part, we're all working in Premiere. So occasionally we'll send stuff out to a colorist, but usually we just give them the footage, and we just give them the footage on a hard drive. So we're not really working in that same workflow just because there isn't time.
Okay, so small company, mostly in-house, all high-res footage that you're working with. So Adobe is good for that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Do you collaborate with other editors, or is it just solo people working on it?
For the most part, it's usually a solo editor. I'm an assistant editor, so a lot of the times I'll prep projects. That was what I did today, was I was prepping a project for an editor to start on, because it's one of our longer our longer pieces. But even stuff that we work on over the period of a couple months, it still usually only ends up being 5 to 10 minute length videos. It's just there's so much footage that was shot and that just has to get cut down. But that's usually like what ends up taking forever. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's just like I'll prep stuff for an editor and then I give them, like, we have like an online server that we use. So I just do all of the editing and I save my project to that server, and then they can just pull my edit off of the server and just keep going the same way as if like I handed them a hard drive.
Cool. And then Jack.
Yeah, the process at A&E monetization. So I do work for the network, not the channel, and the network takes content that has aired, and then our team takes that content, cuts it down into smaller pieces that then go up onto social media like YouTube and Facebook and Snapchat. And it's very much a similar process where they are technically, a lot of them are like program masters, so like kind of large files, but that have already been sort of processed into a more manageable format that can actually be used in Premiere. And then we share Premiere projects using a cloud server, so that's in real time that we can edit those projects and move around and share them. So that's all Premiere. Everyone uses Premiere because we have to in order to share the projects. And it's all really snappy, sort of like straightforward, volume-oriented video making. So Premiere is favored for those things.
Do you use that cloud thing that's the attachment in the Adobe? Cloud?
No, we use something called Lucid Link,
Okay.
which is a real-time cloud service. So that means we could work off of Premiere projects on the cloud server and have them saved rather than having to download them and re-upload them, which is fantastic and very convenient. And that only works for programs like Premiere, where you save a file and all that information for the footage in it is saved in that. Stuff like Avid or Resolve, they create their own file structures, which are local to a very specific file. So those are not, it's not feasible to even use those programs for a workflow like that.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So Flame, Resolve, Avid create a database on your local machine, whereas Adobe and I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Final
they,
Cut, maybe?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Final
They're
Cut,
very loose. So Adobe is very like flexible, which is why it makes it kind of bad for large projects that need to be shared between multiple users.
Yeah. But even, I mean, I'll expand a little bit more. So that's my day job. And then I do try to do freelance. And even for that, I use Premiere because a lot of my freelance is micro budget, client-based stuff, or like in-house requests for promotional materials or work materials. And micro budget is very much that same sort of category of flexibility versus large structure. They're not terribly complex, though. I did do a like a feature-length film that was a micro budget in Premiere, which was a sort of a headache. I didn't cut that. I was a technical editor. I was a conform for that. So I had to take the offline and export it in the online and then deliver that for festivals and whatnot. And in addition to Premiere, I try to use Resolve for personal projects because that's just personally trying to learn that. And it's equally not as flexible in terms of file structure, but in terms of usage, I've been finding it enjoyable. It's a very well-developed program that's getting a lot of love right now. So
Cool. So I guess should we move on to Nick and Chris Free? We kind of spawned off of that, and then we can go to like Kyle and Mike. And then Eric and Jordan. Nick and Chris.
Okay. I'm Nick. This is Chris.
I'm Chris.
I work in a large array of things. Started with kind of a lot of like pharmaceutical stuff, a little sometimes like commercials, a lot of the times like internal stuff, whatever. Premiere is a program I have opened every single day of my life for 2 years. And probably spent over an hour in every day. And I totally agree with everything that they've said so far about Premiere. Like definitely a lightweight, flexible program, which is great for speed and great for shorter stuff. But for sure, even getting larger projects, it really struggles. And I think that Adobe is kind of shifting their focus of Premiere into more of a like social content step because it's a lightweight program, and now that they're introducing a lot of AI driven tools. I don't know if anyone saw, they just pulled out of beta. I think it's called the Remix. And basically you can grab the length of a song, whatnot that you have in your track, any sort of music, and pull it from the right side to the duration of your video or whatnot, and the AI will go through the song, figure out where the cuts make sense in the rhythm in the song, and perfectly match it up. I haven't tried it myself because I got the update today. I can update on it. I can't imagine it's very good, but they're trying to focus to people who I don't think traditionally stay in the edit for super long, if that makes sense. So I was an editor for, I still edit, but I was an editor for about a year and change. Now I've kind of shifted my focus to post-producing, and having like that knowledge of being an editor is really, really helpful, especially in what I like to call thinking in the future during the edit, of predicting the things that client will say, predicting the trajectory of your project, specifically with organization wise is kind of my most recent focus. And it's very easy in Premiere to become unorganized, and I think that's why a lot of people don't like it for long form content. Avid has a very, as you're talking about, rigid structure that is sometimes hard to deviate from. But in that, it's nice because you don't have to worry about it, right? So, I don't really have a whole lot much to say about like technical stuff. I have a couple of things about like overall like thoughts when working for speed in Premiere. But I think for more like edit questions, I will defer to Chris. Take it away.
Um, yeah, no, so I'm kind of a mix of edit with Premiere, but I also do motion graphics, which ends up being very After Effects heavy. Um, and there has been a lot of making sure that like I get everything aligned in After Effects, making sure that everything kind of flows together, can flow from making something in Illustrator, which I end up using a little bit more than I thought I would, to After Effects, to then Premiere, and knowing kind of the whole pipeline of how you can build from the start to the finish between everything in the Adobe suite. Yeah, I didn't really have that much plan for this.
I can piggyback off that for sure.
Yeah, go for it. Hop on it.
One tip I like to remind myself of whenever I edit is always pretend like at any moment this entire project could get moved to somebody who doesn't know anything about the project, because it forces you to keep a very rigid structure. And then in the event that you do need to give it to somebody else, there's no friction, and you seem like a great editor because they can jump in right away and do all of it. And I think that's like one of the biggest, like, tricks with managing clients is when or if they ask for like working files is the term that gets thrown around a lot, which for Premiere is a lot easier to do than other editing software, because it includes like the project file, but also all the media and all this stuff. But if you have from the beginning, kept your versions right, your organization pretty like rigid, then you really don't have to worry about it in the end. And it helps you collaborate with others when you're working in that space. So Chris talking about like moving from Illustrator to After Effects to Premiere, that's where that kind of rigid structure needs to exist, or else a lot of stuff can get lost in like that, because that is a more lengthy process to move between programs. And if you don't have something to support that, then like what's going to happen in a week when someone needs to change something and you don't have it.
File organization is key. If you are still in one of Shayna's classes, listen to Shayna on file organization. I didn't want to for the longest time, and she was so right.
Thank you, Chris.
You got it.
All right, so Kyle and Mike, you are kind of both in the motion graphics-y area. Mike's in sports, Kyle's in branded content.
Retail branded content. Yeah, let's go with that. That sounds nicer.
You want to go, Kyle?
And Kyle, can you also
sure.
talk about your audio stuff that we were talking earlier about?
Yes, I can. Well, hi everyone. I guess I'll start because Mike said I should. I'm Kyle. Like Shanna said, I do motion graphics for branded content because I like the sound of that. I mostly currently do like animations that you'd find in like Verizon stores. Like I guess advertising is a good way to put it. You go into a store, you see all the little buy one get one free stuff. That's me. Yeah, I'd say for that stuff, After Effects is your best friend. I mean, motion graphics in general, I think I can't really think of any other program that hits the mark quite like After Effects does. Buy one, me get one free. No. Okay. Yeah, After Effects is, if you have any interest in motion graphics animation, After Effects is going to be your best friend, 100%. I'd honestly recommend, I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but I recommend getting at least working knowledge in After Effects regardless. I think it's a very good program to know how to use, like being able to say, like, yeah, I can work with it. Like, I'm not saying be like an artiste in After Effects, but like knowing how the program works and what everything does and being able to do basic stuff in it is going to go a long way. Yeah, all editors need motion graphics basics, like Shanna just said. Plus, After Effects is a workhorse. It can do a lot. I don't recommend doing video editing in After Effects, but like yeah, a lot of people are shaking their heads, but like I have personally, like, I'm like literally lazy, don't feel like opening Premiere or something. I've edited clips together just because it's there. Yeah, it's not, it can just because it can do a lot of things doesn't mean you should do everything in it. It's bread and butter. It's bread and butter is definitely motion graphics animation. That's where it shines. And I think it's good to just have working knowledge of all that stuff. Mike, if you want to continue that. I don't know if I left you with anything.
No, you're good. Nick left me more. Everything that Nick said about specifically Premiere is right on. I use this whole suite similarly. In sports, we kind of deal with like campy motion graphics. Like our stuff isn't technically good. It's more just like what the talent requests from us. So I was asked to make like an aquarium. So I would make stuff in Illustrator and then bring it into After Effects and animate it and then edit in clips in Premiere. So at least speaking from a sports perspective, I know like NBC Sports uses Avid and they tend to do like longer form, less campy things than we tend to do. And we use the Adobe Suite because it's a little more cohesive together. It's a little more lightweight, like they were saying. And it's also just kind of an easier program to pick up, I think, than Avid. And yeah, I mean, like Kyle was just saying about After Effects, is it's such a deep program. You can, if you just know how to use After Effects for tracking, you can get by. If you just know how to use it for motion graphics, just know how to use it for video effects, or if you're like Avery, you just make memes in After Effects. Like you can get around with just knowing one aspect of it. If you know all of them, you're very powerful, but you can get away with just one aspect. So yeah, I mean that's all I got regarding that stuff. Everyone said everything perfectly.
Should I talk about the audio stuff now?
Yes, please, and animation.
Oh
much-
yes, yes.
Much as you know.
Wait, what kind of animation should I talk about? Just in general?
I talked to David earlier and he said that Titmouse uses Premiere, so.
Okay, well there you go. Titmouse uses Premiere. Yeah, Titmouse uses Premiere. Titmouse is a very cool company. If you don't know who they are, look them up. Very, very cool stuff comes out of that studio.
Can vouch for that because I was a Titmouse intern in the editorial department and I was in Premiere every day.
I was not a Titmouse intern.
I knew there were more.
Me neither.
Yeah, whatever though. I'm not mad. I'm a little mad.
Garrett's gonna have a question after you talk.
Okay. Okay. Yeah,
Avery.
so I was not a Titmouse intern. Instead, I interned for a little studio called Bang Zoom, which is primarily an audio house. Their big claim to fame is they do a lot of dubbing of anime, like a lot of anime. Like and I was only there for a few months, and I saw a lot of early episodes, which was pretty cool. But yeah, their workflow was very interesting because I guess the closest I can say is it's like a very strange conform editing. Like we were talking about that before. Because yeah, you have to take assets from your voice actors, from any like kind of censoring or a localization animation, and then can make it match a different language and different culture, or as best as you can adapt it, I guess, which is very interesting. They used, I believe, for the live like dubbing sessions, they used Pro Tools. So if you have interest in audio, definitely recommend getting a hold on that program. It's a very intense program. I'm not too good in the audio mixing department myself, and it is exclusively because that program scares me. It's a very, very, very intense program, but if you know how to use it, it's the popcorn scared me off. No, it's a very good program if you can learn how to use it, even if you just get basic kind of audio knowledge in it. More than just, it obviously can do a lot more than stuff you can do in Premiere. And then after the recording sessions, they actually, I'm pretty sure they comped everything. They would get the animation layer and put everything in Premiere, which was fun because I was actually able to help out on some stuff. Because again, they were using finished animations. It wasn't obviously as intense as like a full production, so they didn't need an EDL, they didn't need Avid, but it was still, they needed to put everything together. It was pretty cool time.
Kiara.
Yeah, no. So I have a question. First of all, what was the anime dubbing company you mentioned? I'm just curious.
Bang Zoom Studios. They're in Burbank.
That's so
they
cool.
also-
So did you
they
dub?
also-
Was that pretty much like
No,
the job?
no. I didn't dub. I was not. No. I saw lots of dubs happen. That was cool. So that's kind of how they got started. Their main moneymaker is dubbing animes and I'll say localizing anime, because it's more than just dubbing. You also have to make the translations, kind of make the mouth flaps, they call them, like when the characters talk, you have to find English equivalent lines that can match the mouth flaps. And then sometimes, I think famously Pokemon did this, where they changed a lot of Japanese food to American food, so they would do stuff like that too. So they had to have a very small animation department that was mostly just like adapt, again, kind of covering up stuff or adapting stuff. Sushi equals donuts. Yep. They also they didn't just do anime. They also dubbed, or not dubbed, they did the sound design and voice recording for pretty much every CW DC show, which was pretty cool. Like they did The Flash, Arrow, Legend of Tomorrow. Their big claim to fame that they really were proud of while I was there was they did the voice recording. They held the voice recording session for Rick and Morty. So lots of the cast was going in and out of the studio a lot. And the studios themselves are very cool. They're like, big microphone, big headphones, the nice padding all over the walls, and then they just go through lines. It was very interesting.
That's honestly so cool. I didn't even know that really existed. I mean, obviously I knew, you know what I mean. I didn't know like that was anyway, my biggest question that I just had in regards to animation and everything, how do you feel? So I know so Blender, is that considered like industry standard? Because I know a lot of people just kind of screw around on it, but like you did mention that like Premiere was more so standard. I'm just curious.
Okay, so Premiere I'd say is pretty good. I personally use Premiere to compile my animations. Blender is good. Blender is really fun to mess around in. Avery's opinions. I'm gonna go to Avery after I'm done. But Blender is good. It's a lot of fun. But in terms of being industry standards, it is definitely not industry standards. I think recently it's definitely gotten more of like a following, and like a lot more people are learning how to use it. And you can do yes, thanks Avery. You can do a lot of cool stuff in Blender. I'm seeing from Jacob that Adobe Fuse is industry standard. But yeah, you can do a lot of cool stuff in Blender. But if you're looking for like industry standard 3D animation, because Blender is obviously 3D, Maya 3D is definitely, I wanted to get this in there at some point. If you're interested in learning about 3D animation, definitely try to learn how to use Maya. That is, that's I think at least for character animation, I'll say that that's industry standard animation. I know there's a lot of other good like animation software. Yeah, Nico, I know you use a lot more stuff. I mostly do character animation with 3D animation, but there's a lot better programs for like simulations or like VFX and stuff. I'm trying to think. Yeah, but I'd say Blender is fun. Blender is good. It's a good kind of learning the basics, but if you really want to like really learn how to use it, there's definitely more intense, better programs I would recommend using, such as Maya. Nico, I know you use a lot of like.
Yeah, I definitely have some experience, but not even in like what I personally use, but when I worked for like the real like pro MoGraph guys, they were some wizards, and there was quite an assortment of softwares. I wrote some down. So the main one that they all used was Cinema 4D, but the big difference between Blender and the other ones I'm talking about is the ability to have like custom renderers and to choose what renderer they want to use for their the looks of whatever they were designing. So Cinema 4D seems to be like, as far as I can tell, the industry standard for commercial work that's like super high volume and super they're looking for consistency and not crashes, not a lot of bugs to sort out. So with Cinema 4D, you use renderers like Octane, Redshift, Houdini uses Mantra, which is the built-in renderer. For comping, they did Nuke and After Effects. For doing cloth, they'd use Maya, Marvelous. For painting, there was Substance Painter. Blender was actually used for a couple of things, and then there's a lot of like very specific tools for like tracking and a lot of different things. So that's kind of a whole other world, but there's a lot of places to go from just Blender. But in the same way that Kyle was saying, After Effects is kind of like the fundamental thing that you can use to get into really any aspect of post and see After Effects is that. I think Blender is also for like the 3D world. You can kind of do everything in, you know, a limited scale, but you can kind of get great exposure all around. So it's definitely worth checking out.
If I can add on one more thing, I'd say it's like a jack of all trades. It can do everything well, but like if you find yourself going down, like I really like running simulations, or I really like character animation, or I really like VFX, then I would recommend other programs. I think I've personally only used Maya, Cinema 4D. I haven't really touched Nuke too much, but like, yeah, those are kind of the big ones you see a lot. Like I know I think I'm pretty sure Pixar uses a modified version of Maya. Like I mean, it's so far removed.
They have like a
what Maya
RenderMan
is.
renderer, yeah.
Yeah, I know, because I know when they started they're using Maya, and now it's like their own system, but it's like the logic I'm pretty sure is the same.
Yeah. Nuke is just for compositing, by the way. After Effects and Nuke are compositors, not 3D
Oh, Nuke
stuff.
Nuke doesn't do 3D stuff?
I mean, you can.
Well, it
work
has
in
a 3D engine, but it's
Yeah.
not meant.
Oh,
for
maybe
3D
that's what I'm
work
maybe
for
that's
Maya.
what I'm confusing. Okay. Nuke is a 3D software. Listen, I haven't touched Nuke too much. I should, but I haven't.
No, I just want to say thank you. That's perfect. I honestly cleared up all my questions, so thanks.
Cool. I know we're kind of out of time, but I had one more editor I wanted to introduce you to. So Jordan, Eric are VFX editors on the visual effects facility side. So I just wanted them to briefly talk about how their job's different from editorial or the post house that we've been talking about.
Eric, take it away.
Yeah, so VFX editor on vendor side, as we'll call it, is there's similar aspects to what like conformers like Sam and everyone at Harbor does, in the sense that you are rebuilding a timeline, but our rebuilding a timeline is so that we know that our VFX shots are matching the reference we were given. So we'll get the same EDLs, we'll get the same offline reference, just like a low res DNX file from the editorial house. We'll get from client side VFX editor who's labeling shots, labeling or exporting EDLs. And it's our job to bring that EDL in. In our case, our program of choice for Fuse Effects is Assimilate Scratch, which is another color dailies conform tool similar to Resolve, but also different. I would say it's like much more limited. Like you're not going to do edits like how you do in Resolve, but it's very similar in its color tools to Baselight and Resolve. But
can you put a link in the chat?
Yes. But our job there is to bring the raw plates from client into Scratch, import the EDL, have that run through and find the edits, make sure they're lining up with the offline reference. And then we have to reprocess those plates in a usable file format for the compositors and the 3D artists to do their thing on their end, to do the creative work. And the formats that we usually give them depend on what the client wants back. We usually ask what the client expects from us on their end. And the most common formats will be DPX or EXRs, EXRs being a little bit more common these days, which is just an image sequence. So like some people will export like a JPEG sequence. So it's just a series of still images that then play in a sequence. And we render a image sequence as opposed to a video file because the compositing software Nuke is a lot more friendly with image sequences than video files. It just caches better and it just runs a lot more smoothly than you'll get from a QuickTime. So we process those out of Scratch, and then we have very specific tools with our company of how to get that to the artist with our database and whatnot. But then those renders come back, they come back into Scratch. We display it on a screen, or in our case, on a Clearview, which is like a multi-shared viewing website, so that VFX supervisors can watch it in high quality, or as high quality as you can get for remote. And then we show them before and after compared to offline. If they have notes, they'll kick it back to the artist. If it's approved, then we run through a whole process of, a whole process of processing. just exporting out different variations of that particular shot that we want to deliver to client. And we deliver that with however many handles being extra frames for them to have wiggle room in the edit. And then, yeah, and we do that processing through Nuke. Actually, our pipeline is set up for processing in Nuke. Yeah, we're basically just middle ground conform artists that we kind of do what the guys at Harbor do, but just for this middle stage of VFX.
Yeah, and also just so most of our compositors are using Nuke for the most part, and then like our 3D artists are at least in Atlanta. So Eric's at the New York office for Fuse FX, and I'm in the Atlanta office. So we're on the same team, but we're in different offices on different shows. But sometimes we share shows across locations as well. So yeah, so our pipeline is through Nuke. And then we also, besides doing the conforms and stuff, we also edit reels for the company. And so that is done through Premiere. And so, you know, there's like the office reels. So like what the artists and comp supervisors and the VFX supervisors, what they've worked on, that'll be like a reel for like the office, or there'll be like a specialty reel where they'll be like, they've done a bunch of crowd shots. So then the editor will edit a bunch of crowd shots together, and that'll be specialty reels, or like pitch reels, which is kind of for like, if they're trying to go after a certain show and there's like a specific type of shot, like if like they want to go after something with a bunch of driving comps in it, then, you know, we'll string something together to do that. And we do all of that in Premiere as well. And then we kind of review the same way. So Eric was saying that we stream usually, like, since we're currently Georgia's remote, but Georgia's been in person entirely up for the past like 6 months up until like the last month. So we actually do that in like a little like screening room. So I'll be in the back like running Scratch, and then there'll be like movie chairs and they'll sit up in the front and they'll be like, that pixel looks bad, and then you have to like mark notes, stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know what else. I think like in terms of like just software you should know, Scratch is like super specific, so like I'm not gonna say like learn Scratch, but like especially if you're looking to like move to the Georgia market, I definitely think that like if you're looking to either if you're looking to be a VFX editor or if you're looking to be a compositor, I would definitely say most of the studios in Georgia use Nuke. Like I know that like Crafty 8 uses Nuke, Company 3 uses Nuke, and they're both in Georgia, and they're kind of some of the biggest competitors with Fuse, and Fuse obviously uses Nuke. So yeah, if you're looking to move to Georgia, definitely learn those things. But I think most of our clients use Avid. I don't think anyone uses Premiere that I can.
Yeah, I have not seen any editorial file that was a Premiere project. Pretty much everything Avid, which going off of like you talking about Scratch being very niche, that is very true. We're like only one of 2 companies that actually use Scratch for this purpose. Most other places that I see from job postings or actually talking to people, it's going to be a combination of an NLE, mainly Avid. Like I know ILM uses Avid, or more specifically, most people are probably going to use Nuke Studio / Hero, both made by Foundry, the makers of Nuke, because that's all integrated within the Nuke system, and it makes it easier, fairly easy to do before and after comparisons. And it's achieving the same thing as using Scratch. Our pipeline's just developed more to tailor our needs, and then Nuke Studio is tailored specifically to be integrated with Nuke.
Yeah, and it's also interesting too, because like I know a lot of companies are merging with other companies, and particularly Fuse right now is like bought a bunch of different other studios, and like not, so they're like trying to integrate all of these, and like everyone has a slightly different pipeline. So it's very interesting because like most of the companies use Scratch, but I believe there's like one studio that uses Resolve, and like we were trying to work with them, and it was very difficult because they were also like on a shotgun Resolve like pipeline versus we have a FileMaker and Scratch. So we were just like, how do we work this for the first time? So that's kind of a struggle. So I think that like, at least for Fuse, that they're still kind of trying to work out what they're going to do for the future to combine all of these companies together. So
Yeah, that we're expanding, our tool sets are expanding.
Yeah.
But also to feed off of that, for anyone that's more interested in like the producer side, like VFX producing side of things, if you're gonna be curious of what software you're gonna run into most often, more than likely you're gonna end up dealing with now called ShotGrid. It used to be previously called Shotgun. That will be the more standard tool. But then there's also programs like FileMaker Pro, I think is more common with like editorial teams, I would say, like more client-side editorial teams. But then also another one like F-Track. I know there's some studios that use F-Track as opposed to ShotGrid, but those three, I would say, are your standards for producer and like just management type of software.
Claudia has a question.
Yes.
Hi, I know this is like a little different from what you guys were talking about. I just remember like earlier people were like making differentiations from Adobe to the other programs, like Avid, because there's more the difference in flexibility and how Avid and other programs can be used locally. But doesn't Adobe right now like acquire like Frame.io to do stuff more locally since everybody's doing remote?
That's like review collaboration, I would say. Frame.io is like just a reviewing tool. So like if you're watching a cut with a director or some producers, the execs, just to review a cut of something, they can just view it through Frame.io, and then they could mark up different notes of like, can we change this here? Or this color looks off, like change that a little bit. Like it's just a review tool, not so much an actual like editing tool.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good review tool.
Yeah,
Very good one.
I kind of speak more to that because we don't use Frame.io where I work, but we use Shift, which is I guess I'll say competitor with Frame.io. It's just like a worse Frame.io, but the like the fundamentals are the same. Please don't tell anyone I said that. Fundamentally it's the same. Yeah, you don't really use it. You can integrate it into like your After Effects or your Premiere files, and it's very helpful in terms of like creating a nice, efficient and fast workflow, but you're not going to really do much more than put your files on a link, send that link over to the people that need to watch it, and then they'll give feedback. It's not really great at file management or file integration, but especially between apps, because it's like Google Drive with some additional functionality designed to make it useful for creative editing or apps like Premiere or After Effects.
There is a Final Cut question. Why doesn't anyone use Final Cut anymore professionally?
Because they took away so many tools in the beginning.
Because Final Cut 10 was bad.
Yeah.
Final Cut 10 who?
There's a documentary.
Yeah, the whole documentary, but just like basically what happened to Final Cut is that it used to be this more robust tool, and then Final Cut 10 came out, and it was basically a slightly more beefed up version of iMovie. So they took away a lot of professional tools that editors relied on, and it just pissed off the entire industry to the point where it's like, all right, I gotta go jump to Avid now because I can't rely on Final Cut because it's gonna get too long in the tooth, or jump to Premiere because Premiere back then was integrating more with professional tools and was just more similar to what Final Cut Pro was.
I know that like there's some companies that like news companies that still kind of use Final Cut, not as much anymore. A lot of the people, like Eric was just saying, they've switched mostly to Premiere. Like I know I worked for NPR for like a hot minute and they used Premiere. So yeah. I know CNN also, and like a couple other, like basically every news organization ever is like used Final Cut at one point and then moved to Premiere.
Cool. So I know we're trying to wrap up. We're very over. But Daprina and Ed, did you have anything you wanted to add about either social media or gaming in the editorial aspect? Do you think would be useful for people to know?
So for me, I would say I would just give a quick tip of what I do, because sometimes when you're multitasking, you don't always have time to power up the Premiere Pro or whatever it is you're editing. And for me, especially for me, who I'm still in the process of trying to figure out After Effects, don't sleep on this and don't laugh, y'all. But you can create some really quick short videos with Canva. And I actually did a live the other day on my Facebook where I created a whole like animation video on my Facebook using Canva, because we all know that, 0.3 seconds, if you make 6 videos, that's 0.3 seconds. It's like old school animation. So if you don't always feel like powering up, don't be afraid to use like the old school methods of just creating frame by frame. I also figured out how to make GIFs using Canva also, and actually using them on my own Instagram account. So that's like another thing I'm starting charging people $25 for. So it's another quick avenue. Do not sleep on these easy editing tools coming out, because it's like every time I figure out something new, they be doing so much stuff. If you watch a YouTube video, they even know how to make pictures like drip or like, I don't know, drip effects like you use in Photoshop. There's so much stuff you can do in Canva. So don't sleep on it. But if you want to do a quick edit, a quick video, you can make anything a video in Canva. And I like to use Canva when I don't feel like using my Premiere Pro.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that. Like that's actually, I never thought of using Canva. That's so cool. I was gonna say, like, everybody should download Adobe Premiere Rush like on their phone, because like if anybody's like into TikTok like at all, like I'm obsessed with TikTok, like self-admittedly, like using Adobe Rush is like super easy to like make something like really fast and then like post it on social media if you need to do that. So if anybody's interested in social, like it has very simplistic tools, but it is like if you need to get something out fast, that is like a really good tool to use.
LumaFusion would also probably be a good tool. I haven't used it yet personally, but all the reviews I've seen of it, they just say for like mobile editing on your iPad or your iPhone, it's amazing.
Cool. And Ed, do you have any last minute things from your work?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say like I interact more with the editing department, like after my department, the storyboard team like does their thing, and then they start like assembling the boards into a rough cut for animatic. But one thing I would say that is really useful for editors that at my company is knowing Photoshop, because it's an animation thing. They kind of like seeing some of the drawings that they do sort of on separate layers, so they can move it around in the edit. And that kind of helps make the animation come to life a little bit more. And they use that primarily in Photoshop and in After Effects. So I would say definitely kind of echoing what a lot of people said on here is like, those are both useful tools like to have, especially in animation.
Cool. Does anyone have any last minute, either things that they want to ask or have any experiences they want to share? Okay. Cool. All right. So we went way over, but next week should be cool.